Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting, another wondrous Propagandacast from your host, Imperial Dane. The Sunday challenge, though, has been cancelled for today. Pretty much only 2 people sent in any replays. I rather decide that perhaps that's not really going to do it. So I'll give it one more go. Sunday challenge for the next week. Penal troops. I want to see some. Either spam them, use them to support the other troops, something, but I want to see them. That's it. I want to see some good usage of them, that is, of course. If nothing happens there, of course, with only 2 guys sitting in as well, Barry the Barrister and Walter the Window Cleaner, then of course I'm not going to bother anymore with the challenges, at least not in the near future. So, with that out of the way, let's have a look. We are going to be phasing off here with Cobra, fighting for the Wehrmacht, fighting for the... hang on, tongue slipped, tongue snapped. We're talking the 327th Infantry Division going up against Wilhelmwinter of the Soviets of the 3rd Tank Corps. We are noting here for Cobra, Fortified Armored Doctrine, Lightning War and Joint Operations, and Wilhelmwinter with Guard Motor, Guard Rifle and Shock Rifle Doctrines. So pretty much standard versus DLC doctrines for the time being. Grenadiers up, but we are seeing the MG42 first arriving here for Cobra. Pioneers moving up the right hand side with no support in sight. Interesting. Whereas we are seeing Wilhelmwinter very heavily focusing on the right hand side as well. These pioneers will soon be pushed off with Soviet fervor. So that should be interesting as well. And there we go, pioneers engaging the conscripts, pioneers pulling back, conscripts slowly advancing. It looks like Wilhelmwinter is actually being cautious. He's perhaps worried there might be something supporting the pioneers. Certainly not a bad assumption, but in this case it would one that would be very, very wrong. In fact, the only thing that's covering the entire right-hand side are these 4 pioneers.
We have a fresh grenadier squad.
Grenadiers with an MG42 moving up the left. And a second squad of Grenadier arriving here for Cobra.
The enemy is attempting to steal.
Cobra, in fact, advancing on a nice broad front. Looks like we are going to see Wilhelmwinter advancing on the front. Blah. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen.
The enemy has broken.
I am sadly not perfect, despite what some people seem to think. I'm not perfect. I am not a god-like being descended from the very heavens themselves to deliver salvation unto you all. I'm very sorry to disappoint you in that regard. Anyways, going here for the cutoff point. A very bold move, very aggressive, very decisive, very tricky, sneaky. In fact, what we see here, that Cobra is going for the cutoff point, and in essence he's trying to do several things. Of course, he's trying to cut off the resource. He's also trying to basically throw Wilhelmwinter off his game, and finally I imagine he's also trying to lure him into this because, in essence, I mean, Wilhelmwinter would be forced to counterattack. Of course, he was able to secure this, but even this still provides some pressure, and in essence, what this also serves as is basically bait. He's basically trying to draw Wilhelmwinter into a situation that's not necessarily very favourable for him. But we are seeing here that Wilhelmwinter is in fact reacting nicely. He's not taking the bait. In fact, he's moving in to punish Cobra, forcing in a conscript squad to go for his cutoff point, and also noting here that Cobra, while very aggressive, has not secured any fuel for himself. So in fact, he will be a bit short on that. So it's a bit of a gamble here being played by Cobra. In fact, we're going over to seeing here in response, we're seeing support weapon company up for Wilhelmwinter. We're also seeing the conscripts here hiding behind a fence, begging for salvation. Save us, Comrade Stalin! And sadly, there will likely not be any in the near future as the German infantry is continuing to fire away. The pioneers, though, continue to have absolutely kein Glück in their fight. Grenadiers with a light machine gun, that on the other hand is a good move, increasing the firepower. And we are noting here 4 squads of Grenadiers for Cobra. 327th Infantry Division going in heavy, all guns blazing. No tech rushing for him, that's for sure. Here on the Langraskaya. And there we go, conscripts are definitely going to be outmatched in this fight. Once Grenadiers get light machine guns, they are superior to conscripts, and as of course the conscripts get close with a Molotov somehow, in which case the Grenadiers are going to lose. Well, that is about one of the few conditions, but then of course, I mean, you are then upgrading your Grenadiers with 60 munitions, which rather explains everything. And we are seeing a mortar out for the Soviets. Pretty bold player, but of course also not a bad idea considering the sort of position. We are seeing that Cobra has taken up a mortar to bombard it, to keep the Germans' heads down, to perhaps do some damage. Is definitely one way of approaching it, and it's definitely interesting. It's definitely a bit rarer, but that does not mean it's bad. In fact, I like it. And certainly could support a good assault here. In fact, he could also try and smoke even if you want to, but I don't think that's going to be the initial idea. Maxim pulling up as well. Mortar rounds flying through the air, though not quite impacting with anything at the time being. Like to make a nice company up. Conscripts are ready.
Yes.
Very close there, very close, but no cigar, no cigar. Mortar barrages are usually not the most accurate. What you usually want to do is have the mortar fire by its own. It generally tends to be more accurate that way. But there we go, Grenadier squad took a loss, the rest rather wounded as well. And now the assault is really commencing. Grenadiers moving up there to flank the Soviet assault force, like machine gun setting up position. Flamethrower engineers getting into trouble. Conscripts moving up there. MG42 is now cut off on its own. The situation is suddenly deteriorating for Cobra, although we do see a half-track out, pulled in from some nearby Panzer or Panzer Grenadier division. Mortar rounds continue to fall down. MG42 realizing the course is lost. Grenadiers are continuing to hold out, and there we go. Combat engineer squad wiped out to a man. Grenadiers are getting suppressed by the Maxim. And conscripts quickly rushing in to secure the flamethrower. Half-track rushing into everything. And we are seeing a mortar following up there for Cobra, so very heavy on the tier 1 units, very heavy. We're talking 4 Grenadiers, an MG and a mortar. That's a very potent combination. We're also noting Guards Drive combined arms for Wilhelmwinter, since there's nothing else you could have chosen. And thus hitting the dirt with his conscript Nicky. Pushing up here, Maxim supporting the conscripts west hand advance. Another Maxim up to hold up the centre, while the mortar might also want to move up a bit closer to the front line as well. Conscripts continue to hold up the half-track. The half-track obviously not very useful with its machine guns, something I do find a bit sad. But actually looks like Wilhelmwinter is inevitably forced to retreat in the face of that nonetheless. Points are being secured. Troops are bouncing up the right-hand flank. Cobra applying a nice bit of pressure, and looks like, oh, miner went off, or perhaps a mortar round connected with some poor bastard.
The enemy is taking our territory.
Pioneers versus the conscripts, and the conscripts easily convinced the pioneers who's the boss and forced them to retreat. And there we go, Flampanzerwagen on the way. Mortar crew might want to get closer to the fire so they don't get frozen to the tube itself, which would make operating it a bit tricky. Just saying. Bunker up, like you're going to be a medic bunker. Not a bad approach, not a bad approach. I mean, considering the sort of force it currently has, Lightning War Doctrine would work very well, since it's a doctrine that works quite well with infantry. It has upgrades for them, it has relief infantry, which allows you to sort of minimize losses in some ways, and you've got tactical movement, plus of course you can throw in some heavy armor to support. Second doctrine that would really work well with all of this would be joint operations, due to the artillery field offers, amongst other things, but of course also the emplacements and such could work quite handily with it. Fortified armor is perhaps a doctrine that doesn't quite as much synergize with it. A lot of the abilities are more specifically targeted towards armor, so there is less there. Of course you could still go for it, but it might not necessarily be the most, thing that meshes together well with what he already has. But of course, I mean, you don't have to do that, but in this sort of situation I could certainly think that might be one way of doing it. Certainly Wilhelmwinter is the one who's actually focusing on his infantry. I mean, he's chosen Guards Rifle Doctrine, which is currently, of the 3 doctrines, he's chosen the one that works the best with infantry, particularly his conscripts will hit the dirt, submachine guns and such, and Guards Rifle Infantry of course also being available eventually. In fact, already now, so choices, opportunities, thoughts and all that. Mortar firing away, 4 kills there. Pioneers need to get into some heat, warm their thinker so they don't freeze off. like sausages
Enemy has broken our
of the
supply
cheap
lines.
kind.
Bunker has been converted to an
And there we go, medical bunker up, well done. No medical upgrades here for Wilhelmwinter. In fact, we're seeing the Tankovi battalion going up here for the 3rd Tank Corps. And of course, remember, the Soviets tended to rate their armoured units at a higher level, basically, because during Barbarossa they'd simply suffered so heavy armoured losses that they basically downgraded everything. So, for example, a tank company was in fact equivalent in Western terms to a platoon, which rather meant that if you actually wanted something that was close to a Western or German tank division, you actually wanted a corps. Those are, for example, some of the things to keep in mind. Grenadiers advancing on a nice southern front, perhaps a bit too broadly. Also munitions cache up for Cobra. Oh, already switched over. Seem to have gotten that out of the way. He's close to having access to the SMG upgrade. And of the 3 doctrines he has then, I mean, what would work best for the munitions cache would either be Joint Doctrine, or Joint Operations, or Lightning War. The Fortified Armor Doctrine really wouldn't work well together with the munitions cache, since there's not a lot of abilities in it that really depend on munitions. So that was at least something I would keep in mind. Submachine gun here being available, likely will be upgraded, yes in fact. Submachine guns for everyone, comrades! Field gun up here at the front line as well. Flame for half-track advancing. Right hand side turn. That could end up very nicely for that Maxim. Popping into the house right as the flamethrowers are right outside the window. Yeah, let's have a barbecue. And there we go. The Maxim crew realizes there are other places it wants to be. Mortar rounds flying through the air. Field gun moving up. T-70 light tank also prepared.
units awaiting orders. Supply sector under attack.
Maxim versus MG42. Whoever pins the other first wins, and that's likely going to be the MG42 in this case.
Enemy has 300 points remaining. We have an isolated sector.
Flamethrower pioneer taking up a nice position against the Maxim crew, but at the same time field gun rather is presenting a threat as the building is close to collapsing by this stage. Conscripts holding up. Also noting the flamethrower half here, keeping a nice distance, trying to avoid getting hit with anti-tank grenades. Quite nice. Soviet mortar crew continues to fight, getting mortared by the Germans. Veterans one already here for Cobras. And the T-70 advances here, going in, hunting down the Germans. Also noting there's a bit of a flaw currently in Cobra's build. There is absolutely no anti-tank, no pack, no puncture check. Not even a telemine to block the most vital routes in case of something trying to hunt them down. And we're quickly seeing here that Wilhelmwinter is going to follow up with the T-34-76. Splendid. Wunderbar even. If you're... unless of course you're the Germans, in which case of course it's not. Then leads here Panzerfausting. Good move here. Why is this a good idea to do actually? You might lose some more men, but thing is, it won't be able to follow you on the other hand, and that's the important thing. If you don't Panzerfaust and then retreat, you're very likely going to lose the entire squad as the T-70 hunts it down. So what Cobra did there ultimately could have ended it badly, but ultimately the end result, if you hadn't done it, would have been worse. So usually you're better off Panzerfausting a T-70 like that in those cases. And there we go. T-70 tank almost down, but ultimately succeeds due to cover fire from a Maxim and some combat engineers joining in the fun as well. And there we go, T-34 rolling up, 76mm gun firing away. And a pack actually arrives. But also shoots a bit too early, ensuring that the T-34 gets alerted in time, which is a bit of a shame. Conscripts here could try and get off an anti-tank grenade on the half-track, but apparently they decide there are other things to do. Apparently Wilhelmwinter is not quite paying attention. Either way, the conscripts are not having a happy day. Another bunker being set up there. Troops reinforcing. Conscripts got lost. Below there.
The enemy is encroaching on our territory.
What do you need?
Mortar rounds flying through the air.
Supply lines have been
Not
cut.
quite connecting with anything though. And looks like Cobra's preparing for a large assault up the left flank. It rather looks like Wilhelmwinter might be trying something on the the right flank, while the Germans moving up the left flank. Bloody hell! Can't seem to get track of sides at the moment. Oh well, silly me, very silly me. But machine gun bunker is up to actually hold up the centre.
Are now in effect.
But we also see a nice quick response from Wilhelmwinter, basically bombarding it with the field gun. Pioneers making their advantage, using the blizzard to actually sneak up here. Good move, good move. I mean, some people tend to forget that blizzards are actually good for creeping up, since of course your opponent can't see that far either. So good usage there of the Pioneers. Nice infiltration assault there.
We are ready.
And the bunker is down. Bit of a shame.
The enemy has cut off a sector.
Didn't manage to do that much.
We will keep it.
We heard you.
Fresh conscripts brought train. Can also be quickly equipped with submachine guns.
Mortar!
Conscripts here, conscripts there, conscripts everywhere. Cobra seems to be a bit unsure what to do now. The T-70 rather covering the flanks quite nicely with its speed, high rate of fire and maneuverability.
Now installed a field hospital at headquarters. Are you going to pave the way to Berlin with the frozen corpses of your men?
There we go, field gun getting into trouble, might in fact even be lost. And in that case it would be a good move for Wilhelmwinter to actually secure it. Cobra secure it. Get himself another piece of tank gunnery, but of course also some artillery which could be utilised against his opponent. Quickly advancing up here, 2 gunneries for light machine guns by the way. Lovely, lovely. Mortar nearby to the front line, but the problem is it's freezing to death.
Warning! Your troops are freezing to death. Passing.
Which is anything but good. And we also note here that a lot of Cobra's troops are also freezing. The blizzard is definitely doing its damnedest to make this difficult for either side. And the problem is Cobra doesn't really have much to actually stop it. He lost his pack just now. Well, no it hasn't, it's actually down there. Never mind, I was following the wrong thing. My mistake.
You are responsible for your soldiers. If they freeze to death, they cannot die.
Mortar almost down. Wiped out, fact, even.
We heard you.
T-70 boldly going where it probably might not be a good idea, but the Pack 40 is actually having quite a bit of trouble hitting it. Another T-34 following up there for Wilhelmwinter. Wunderbar, wunderbar.
The new men have arrived.
I hope this armor holds. T-70 reporting.
T-70 continuing its reign of terror, in fact getting very close to Veterancy 2. Although much here, Panzer Grenadier, or Grenadier, disable it with a Panzerfaust, and there we go, well done, but Veterancy 2 is gained, increasing damage and of course damage resistance, and a Panzer IV command tank signifying fortified armor for Cobra. Definitely not the doctrinal choice I would have recommended. Definitely not, I think, the one that would miss best with his strategy until then. Of course, it allows him to not go for support armor core, but the Panzer IV command tank is going to be limited in effectiveness against Russian armor. It did manage to get the T-70s, I suppose that's a small thing, but it's not going to be as easy with the T-34s. Whoops, wrong button, sorry. Popping out to Cobra. And there you go, Panzer IV, Befehlspanzer versus T-34. Not really a good fight with a low barrel low velocity gun Panzer IV versus T-34. Of course, once it gets into friendly territory, it's going to take a lot less damage, but even then, it does a lot less damage versus the T-34 itself, and also has a low penetration, so it's not really a good fight. What he should do is actually pop some smoke here. Obfuscate the line of sight off. Tank. Also note it's time for the mid-game analysis, by the way. Was about to forget that. My apologies. My right arm is slightly aching for some reason, so that is slightly distracting me, in fact. So my apologies if I do make mistakes. Probably should have said that earlier, but didn't think it would actually affect me, but apparently it does a bit. Either way, the fight is currently a bit 50-50. We are now seeing a doctrinal choice. Again, it's one I personally do not agree with. I don't think it's one that would work the best for Cobra. But again, that is my opinion. In fact, had he gone for the other one, he could probably call it a Tiger tank by now. And that probably would be doing a lot better than the Panzer IV command tank. Just saying. Though, of course, if he doesn't know how to use it, it might as well all be for naught. So, there's, of course, that counter-argument right there. But he needs to buff up on things that can actually deal with the enemy armor from a distance, and at Pack 40, clearly it was a bit misused there without proper support, which is a bad idea, by the way. But a support armor co-op, getting a Stuk or two, and then going to town on the enemy, I think would work the best as an immediate strategic remedy here for Cobra at the moment. He's also going to need to actually have to use Panzer. Hold down, not so much. And of course, I mean, if you can use the command tank with the Stuks and a proper advance, it can actually be quite a problem. And of course, there's always the possibility of an elephant, but let's just say I'm not hugely convinced for Wilhelmwinter. Of course, it's about keeping up the pressure. It's about recruiting these anti-tank and field guns, turning against his enemy's armor, whatever little it is, and otherwise keeping up the pressure. I mean, he's attacking from several angles, doing that quite nicely, making good use of support units for his infantry, that is Maxims, mortars, and getting submachine guns and whatnot. In that sense, really making things as difficult as possible for Cobra in return, despite Cobra having several light machine guns and other fun things. What Wilhelm might want to consider is actually mining some of the approaches. In fact, right here would be good. Just to keep that in mind as a suggestion. Let's return to the fight. Panzer IV command tanks issues continue, and now it's actually stopped up. And there we go, T-34 scores the kill. Panzer IV Befehlspanzer kaputt. Tragic. German command tanks generally just being a tank with more radio equipment and less ammunition, I believe, than other vehicles. Some armies went for dummy tanks, the Germans did not. Though that might have gone for older tanks which might not have had so much combat usage, but still could have used some usage in a fight. Stuff like this, or a Panzer III were also common command tanks here and there, even late in the war. But a second Befehlspanzer out. By the way, note the Panzer IV command tank is an incredibly fast tank. It is in fact faster than the Panther, which is itself also quite fast. But bearing down on the enemy with its high explosive shells, doing a nice bit of work there. Taking mortar fire though, and actually gaining the Soviet mortar veteran 2, thus getting it a damage increase.
Panzer IV command tanks can now be deployed.
Now, of course, the question becomes, what will Cobra do next? What shall he aim for next? Try to achieve next. Getting mortared right there. And making good progress on the left flank. Launching a larger infantry assault, actually causing quite a bit of problems here for Wilhelmwinter, but Wilhelmwinter launching engineers to disrupt movements of Cobra in return, and of course resource flow. And now the Panzer IV is going to be out for a bit of a while as it gets repaired, if it gets repaired, of course.
Our lines of supply are disrupted. We are ready.
Minor engagement up here. Combat soldiers moving in to engage the Panzer Grenadiers. Deal with them first. But the Panzer Grenadiers do take a large chunk out of the combat engineers for the Sturm Gas. In the meanwhile, the conscripts take advantage of this. Running up, and there we go. Molotov against the Panzer Grenadiers. Well done, and the Panzer Grenadiers are forced to vacate the position. Heinrich going up in flames. And quickly following up on that, we see the rest of the Soviet forces move up. It's large conscript squads, machine guns. Field gun looks like Wilhelmwinter is going to bear into the left flank, while the tank keeps the right flank a bit occupied. And the Panzer guns with the Panzer X are the ones doing that. And in fact might get wiped out. That will be a blow. Yes, indeed, wiped out. Well done then. Of course, that is the power of the Soviet tank. Even the T-34-76, they can devastate German squads quite nicely if you're not careful. Grenadiers versus conscripts, hit the dirt, light machine guns, submachine guns, all kinds of machine guns. Who shall be the winner of this engagement? Maxim moving up, and that clearly means it's going to be the Soviets. But we do see the flamethrower half-tank moving up, the Flammenpanzerwagen. While a single squad of Grenadiers slowly goes to the right-hand fuel. Ooh, anti-tank grenade right there. Could be a good time for the field gun or a tank to strike. Also looks like he's saving up resources for an elephant tank destroyer. Definitely one way of doing it. Now the Panzer IV command tank is on the move again. Still retaining all 4 squads of Grenadiers, by the way. Quite nice, quite nice. Good unit preservation right there. I would like actually to see more of them. And also note he's now floating 264 munitions. Again, that's a bit the problem with this doctrine. You can't really have much, use munitions on that way, so you need to use them on mines or upgrades. And it's certainly he's got 2 squads of Grenadiers which could easily be upgraded with light machine gun as well to take the fight to the enemy that way. Really lay in for some infantry pressure, which would really make it difficult as well, I believe, for Wilhelmwinter to actually do something. And there we go, field gun flanking as well. Panzer IV command tank going to force way. Again, smoke Panzer position. Smoke discharges are God. And so is blitzkrieg tactics. I mean, he's got some options here, but he doesn't seem to be using it, which is a definite shame. A definite shame. And I would usually always suggest you try and actually make use of the veterans abilities. Also, for example, one like this, which actually allows you to keep track of your opponent's infantry movements through the fog of war in the minimap. There are plenty of things you can actually do with these small veterans abilities, and I mean, if you know how to use them, you can actually either gain some useful information, nasty information, that's perhaps a bit too silly, but basically, gain information or basically gain some small advantage. If properly used, they can actually either save a unit or actually cause some nasty damage to your opponent's units. Stuff like blitzkrieg tactics in particular can be used both ways, partly to evade your opponent, but of course also to quickly get behind him, maneuver about him and do some damage as well. And of course it helps you move faster, but it also makes your units harder to hit. In that sense, blitzkrieg is in fact a very powerful veterans ability in essence, if you know how to use it, that is. If you don't, it's useless, like the others. German troops here fighting a desperate fight in the centre, advancing up, but coming under fire from Maxims, field guns and a T-34. While another one's firing from a nearby flank. And we quickly see that Cobra's assault boxed down and ends up with him being run off without actually having gained much in territory. And now there's a possibility of calling in the elephant tank destroyer if that is what he truly wants. And the Panzervolk command tank is once more going to need some repairs. The commander watching everywhere. Yeah, I can see the hedgerows and not the enemy. Yeah, that's good. There we go, Schwerer Panzerjäger arriving. Fire pits going up. Pack 40 ready and almost Red 22. That could definitely be a problem. Troops reinforcing. Elephant rolling up.
Ready for orders. Reinforcements complete. It's done.
And a bit of quiet on both sides. Elephant here needs to be careful. How about not moving it? Not moving it. Oh, what are you doing, Cobra? You missed an opportunity right there to do some damage to the T-34. That was a bit of a blunder, if I might say so myself. And an airstrike going in. The Sturmovik has been summoned to conduct a strafing run. And we see a swift retreat here in the face of such devastating Soviet firepower. Elephant needs to be careful. Careful, Cobra. Careful, 4-6. It's alone and you're actually advancing it. And there we go, getting flanked by Pat, and there we go, getting rammed, and it's immobilized right in front of the Veteran 82, Pack 40. This is incredibly bad news. Field gun moving up as well. One mistake here might have cost Cobra the Elephant tank destroyer without actually doing any damage. It didn't even get to fire a single shot, and Cobra's already lost it. I mean, if you don't know how to use an Elephant, you probably shouldn't be using it. It's not a tank, it's a tank destroyer. In particular, one with such great range. Panzer IV command tank flanking him, but it's already too late. It's going to get caught by everything else if it's not careful. And there we go, rammed down. Veteran C3, Pack 40 going to turn about. Panzer is advancing through the darkness. Half-Tech nearby to help support and reinforce troops. Pop smoke, 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 Nebeln! Blitzkrieg out of there, but apparently Cobra is not quite aware of the existence of this otherwise wondrous ability, which is quite the shame. Quite the shame. And there we go, Panzer IV command tank is down. What a waste. Brav grenades flying through the air, T-34 ready, pulling back. And another T-34 on the way.
More units are here. We are losing territory.
Red flank getting harassed here by the Germans, trying to take back some kind of fuel flow. And Soviet armor continuing to do what it can. The swift assault by the flamethrower half-track threatens to overtake the field gun, but we are seeing a swift response from a T-34 in response, and not much else going on here. Still nothing that indicates any anti-tank guns or armor. Although looks like, there we go, another Pack 40. And we also noting here that Wilhelmwinter has already placed a demo charge right in case Cobra decided to use the building. He would easily blow it up. Cheeky bastard. There we go. Conscripts forcing what remains of Cobra's front line to actually collapse with a swift assault to the flank. Another pack up. Looks like Cobra's getting a bit desperate. Overly focusing on the enemy armor will actually neglecting the infantry and the support unit, which is probably actually his bigger threat.
Conditions are now in effect.
Our territory is falling into enemy hands. A sector has been cut off.
And the Soviet bolts are getting increasingly close to veterancy free.
Unit count is increasing.
Minor engagements here and there. T-34 moving up. And we're actually noting a mine here, but that might be a bit too late for it. And a chance here of the pack getting flanked by the T-34, which is now veteran 2, increasing damage and also decreasing damage taken.
25 points remaining. You will pierce.
And there we go, getting the entire pack crew. And a fun fact about anti-tank guns: once they're actually spotted by an enemy tank, their survival rate was actually incredibly low. They tend to get blown up very quickly. The gun shield generally not really being there to survive a direct hit, for example, from a high explosive round from a tank. So most anti-tank guns in the war were actually usually engaged directly from the front, or at least a bunch of them were. Though of course it was more preferable to actually try and flank them. But now Cobra seems to be feeding troops piecemeal at the enemy, which is generally not really to his advantage. I mean, that pack really should have had more support, or at least another pack covering it. Instead that did not happen. And now he's sending another pack to die. Except a third Panzer IV Befehlspanzer has arrived. And that T-34 might in fact go down in flames. Ooh, very close. Looks like the Panzer IV Befehlspanzer might get it. Although the veteran defeat T-34 of course might knock it out as well, doing a lot of damage. And again, smoke, Nebel, Blitzkrieg, something Cobra. But rather seems like he's not very keen on using those abilities.
Machine gun ready. Blizzard is passing. Normal weather is returning.
Wilhelmwinter continuing to advance across the flanks. Kotzk's moving up there.
Staying under your command.
Next from there, the noose is tightening. There's barely anything left for Cobra to really resist with. Half track close to going down. Pack 40 moving up.
The blizzard is gone.
And that T-34 is very close to destruction. And we're noting another T-34 on the way. This one could actually move in and try and support. And there we go, Pack 40 gets the kill. Very close, and also notes like a bunker has been set up to cover this area. That's not going to last very long. And there we go, another bunker collapses. And looks like Wilhelmwinter also managed to steal the German mortars on top of his own.
The enemy is down to 25 points.
25 points left. Things are definitely not looking good. Half track was actually close to veterancy free. What a shame, what a shame.
Have secured the sector.
Enemy contact.
Enemy forces are
And an anti-aircraft half track now.
T-34 here.
Grenadiers getting shredded. Pack here running into trouble with the T-34, which continues just to kill the fascists.
They've opened up on us!
Just going to speed this up a wee bit. Desperate attempt here from Cobra to secure the victory points, but there we go. Game over. A loss for the Reich, for the 327th Infantry Division in the face of the 3rd Tank Corps. The problem largely came down to, I think, Cobra making a poor choice in doctrine. Was not really one that meshed well with what he'd really chosen or what he further planned to do. He just used the Panzer IV command tank as a sort of standalone tank, which isn't really what it's suited to in the long term, particularly if your opponent goes for tanks as well. That rather was a huge problem. And the Elephant tank destroyer really wasn't well used either, and otherwise he didn't use the doctrine at all, and particularly Lawler's powerful Panzer Decision ability was utterly ignored. I mean, you don't go for that doctrine if you don't intend to use Panzer Decision. And in that sense, I mean, it really didn't mesh with his overall doctrinal choice. It was more, well, if I go for that, I don't need to build tanks otherwise. And then, of course, he didn't really realise, perhaps the Panzer IV command tank is not the best tank either. I mean, he should have gone then for, Lightning War. It would have meshed the best with all of his infantry and would have provided him with a Tiger tank, which probably would have suited him better anyways. So in that sense, when we're dealing with some poor doctrinal choices, not really making good use of his abilities either. I mean, we saw some really nice infantry play, but after that it just fell apart for him. He really didn't seem to know what to do besides, infantry and doing well with it. He needs to work on his armor, definitely, but also on his doctrinal choices, I think. Wilhelmwinter, of course, had a bit of problems, but he reacted quite nicely with the Maxims, the mortars. He rallied nicely. He could have done with mines, and certainly so could have Cobra. I mean, he flowed tons of munitions, so he should have gone for something with mines, for example. Mine the roads, mine the approaches, S-mines, telemines, all that. I mean, if you're floating munitions that way, use them. Same applies a bit, to Wilhelmwinter, mine the approaches, but otherwise, good use of his doctrine. He could probably have benefited a bit from a 152mm howitzer, perhaps a bit of guards infantry as well to sort of support things up, but overall, I mean, he did well. And certainly good uses of stealing his opponent's equipment. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this match. Hope you learned a thing or two. If you did want to subscribe, tell your friends. If you didn't, well, why not send a replay of your own? This is Imperial Dane saying cheers.